to be sure. She very politely declined. She said, "No, I'm happy with the boys." And so that's the way it worked out.
I see.
And pretty much a little change here and there, but we, she loved the boys, they loved her.
Let me ask you something.
Oh,
Your wife Nellie, how much did she know, especially when you got into carrying nuclear weapons? I imagine most of this must have been, pretty classified in terms of who could know this. How much did she know about what you were doing at that time?
she really didn't, but she sort of put two and two together.
Okay.
She was good at that.
Okay.
So she figured out what we were doing, but it wasn't talked about.
Right. Yeah. What I mean, any military spouse is in a position where they fear for your life,
Yep.
and that's always going to be the case. But if not knowing what she knew, that at least sensing and having a pretty good idea of the kind of thing that you were doing, did you ever have conversations about what you would do, what would happen, and how did that impact your relationship?
Of course, we talked about it. And what I was talked about was not classified.
Okay.
And most of the mission, of course, was highly classified.
Right.
So I couldn't talk directly about it, but I talked around it, and she knew pretty well what was going on.
Right. Right. I can only imagine that there were probably a lot of, as you were doing, like really critical things. There probably must have been a lot of sleepless, nights for her over the course of the years. What was your experience knowing what you were dealing with? I mean,
Well,
by that time you were an expert, a pilot, but obviously carrying nuclear weapons back and forth thousands of miles is no light matter.
yeah, I was an expert co-pilot.
Hmm.
The aircraft commanders were people who had a lot of experience, majors, captains, but their experience went way back, and they were used to what we call scud running, kind of going around the clouds and around the mountains, whatever.
Right.
Well, we flew we flew with these people, and we had a lot of military training in operating with clouds, in the clouds.
Right.
So our preference as young pilots, we had a lot more of that kind of experience than our friends in the left seat.
Right.
Well, they were in charge, they were in command, but we were the ones that flew by instruments a lot better, more training.
Mm.
So I spent 1,000 hours, just over 1,000, being a right seater, keeping them out of trouble. He'd get in the middle of the clouds, and I'd fly. That was true of all the co-pilots.
Wow.
And we were right out of pilot training, so we were well trained in instrument flying in the clouds.
Mhm.
And
Wow.
so that I never got advanced into left seat, the commander, because we served a very important mission in keeping people on should be on instruments. We were that. We were that.
Yeah.
So that's the way it went.
I imagine. I'm just trying to think of the mindset that it must have been the case. Maybe it was more routine for you guys who were actually doing it. I'm thinking from time to time there must have been either like something unexpected that came up or a technical or mechanical error that would have sent the fear of God into you. Did anything like that ever come up, or did you ever hear of anything like that happening?
Well, it went smoothly with a few exceptions, but finally you get enough of that. It's time to move on.
Yeah.
A requirement for B-47 pilots came in, the bomber,
Yeah.
and I volunteered. So I got that assignment and moved from transport to bombers.
Okay. Wow. And once you did that, you started doing that at a shall we say, a very propitious time, because it happened to overlap with, as you know, I read in the excerpt at the beginning, the Cuban Missile Crisis. How did you first know, as part of a bomber crew, that you were in a situation that could have potential global nuclear consequences?
Well, I just happened to be on alert duty in the alert facility at Schilling, Kansas.
Right.
And that was unusual because I was on standboard and had other duties, of course. But this was a special duty, and I was just pulling my share when all the crisis opened up.
Yeah.
And so I happened to be on alert. And that made a big difference because I also happened to be the ranking guy on alert at that time. So that put me in a very, very special position. I was the commander of the alert force.
Wow.
That part of it. There was all over the country, of course. But anyway, when we deployed, because we had a procedure, we'd been doing alert duty for years. But anyway, the procedure was to be ready at all times. And so we had to alert the flight plans, everything, briefed the wing commander, all of that. So we were ready to go.
Wow. Yeah.
They deployed us to Ohio,
Right.
Dayton, to the municipal, and they were not expecting us.
Okay.
So it was crazy.
So you were in Dayton, Ohio, and
Yep.
you were waiting for things to play out.
Yep.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, you didn't have the communications technology on your planes at that time that would, like, even a year or two later be in place where you could communicate from them, and as you were on the airfield there, as I understand, waiting, you were actually like standing by like a payphone waiting to hear whether you were like going to fly off and bomb the Soviets. Is that correct?
Indeed, it is.
Wow.
We got there. They were not expecting us. We had to guard the airplanes, so we couldn't fulfill the total requirement, but we had two men that were guarding the airplanes 24/7.
Yeah.
And so we assigned them the first, and then we covered that all through the night, cold and all that. Anyway, I just said, hey, there's the fire station. We'll go down there and ask them.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, a miracle. They said, we'll take you in. We got beds and we'll feed you. And I said, wonderful.
That's great.
Now back to the telephone deal.
That's
unbelievable. They had a telephone booth just like the old-fashioned red ones.
right.
Were outside. Well, this one was inside. It was heated in there. It was lighted and very seldom used.
Yeah. Probably, I guess it would have been a little chilly towards the end of October, huh?
Oh boy, yeah, I hate to think of what would have happened without them. And so that's
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 amazing.
that is a surprise ending to that part of it, and they were absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. Well, that's
They took
it's amazing that like that's sort of like, I mean, it seems like to the contemporary eye, I think that it seems like, especially in the context of what could have been Armageddon,
yes,
amazing, like fairly haphazard in terms of what
I
happened there, and yet it all worked out, and they took you in, and you were able to get the messages okay,
it was
and
amazing. Amazing.
yeah, it really is. It really is amazing, and to think, and this is one group of of many, I'm sure, in many places across the country and many places across the world that were in a similar situation at that time.
Some
It's
people were sent to Air Force bases that were not part of the Strategic Air Command
right.
uh, parties that were assigned targets in Russia.
Yeah.
So they had all the base facilities, fuel, the whole bit.
Right.
They were much. They were taken care of. But
It
boy, we had to.
At least you were in the United States and had a friendly, group of firefighters to put you up, in order to make you work, to make it work okay for you. But yeah, it's just kind of crazy to think about, isn't it? It's
Never charged the Air Force a cent.
wow,
They did it's on us. We're
wow,
part of the war effort. They were glad to help us.
that's
And
amazing.
it was marvelous. It was a blessing of the good Lord.
That's amazing.
Amazing. So that's the way that went.
We're speaking with Stan Luther. He is the author of a lifetime in the atmosphere, memoir of flight. I suppose you must have seen the movie that came out in the following year, Dr. Strangelove.
Oh yeah.
And you must have had some thoughts, being as close as you were to the process that actually happened. I mean, for one, it seemed like in that movie, at least, they did. It didn't work out, but they did have the capacity to communicate, from the planes in real time, unlike the ones that you flew. What was your reaction when you saw that film?
Mixed. It was done in a way that was kind of strange.
It's appropriate.
And they told it kind of like it is. If you took a positive view, which I did, then you kind of understood where they were going with it. You could easily, and it was misunderstood, I think. Now, it wasn't exactly friendly. It wasn't exactly otherwise either.
Yeah.
So you kind of made up your own mind.
What were the airplanes, or the technology and the systems depicted in the airplanes in the film? Was that relatively accurate in terms of the kinds of planes that they were showing, as far as you were aware?
Pretty good. It's acceptable.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
It's always interesting to find out, how close to the truth those things are in terms of the technology, because they're obviously extended sequences, like where they're trying to send off communications, or trying to navigate things in the plane. It takes place in a number of different places, but it certainly. You must have been thinking about your experiences, obviously, when you saw that movie.
I was.
Yeah.
I tried to decide whether I liked it or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
There were parts of it that were pretty kind of,
Yeah.
but there were parts of it right on the money.
Yeah.
And so, put it in context.
Yeah.
It was a